Welcome to the All About You podcast. I have a question for you. If I said AI, are you excited, a little confused, or maybe a little bit concerned? In this conversation with Andrea, we are diving into what it is, should we be concerned, and how it can make your life easier, and maybe after this conversation, not quite so worried about it. Andrea, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. Andrea, let's start at the beginning. AI, artificial intelligence. Okay, what exactly does that mean?
So it's funny that we call it artificial intelligence. For the most part, these systems aren't really creating their own intelligence, right? They're all being trained from our own data. So I can break it down a little bit to, there's really two major parts of AI. There's machine learning, which uses visual data and predictive languaging. It predicts language. That's one part of the AI. Then we have the GPTs, right? The ones that we all have been hearing about for the last 2 years, the chat GPTs and all of those chatbots. The GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. This is a deep learning system. It can handle more complex processing. It can generate language, visual, games, and audio generation, right? But all of this is being created from our own training data. We have to train these systems in order for them to give us any output at all. Because these companies they're protected from being transparent from where they're getting their data to then train these AI models. From what AI auditors do, for example, is they look at open source data sets. What that means, I know this gets like very technical and like technical and a lot of jargon, but basically what this means, let's say this model doesn't know what a fruit is, right? It's a machine. So you have to go in and tell it all the fruits that exist in the world. And then once you've put in that entire data set, then it knows what all the fruits are in the world. Okay, and now it just knows the names of the fruit, but then you can tell it what the fruit looks like, and then they can get more and more complex, right? Now, if they know what the fruit looks like, you say, hey, can you generate a picture of an apple for me? And it will give you an apple. But that apple might be purple because it doesn't. Maybe you never trained it to tell it that like apples can never be purple, as far as I know. And so these models, what they know is based off of these data sets that are given to them and how they're trained. They don't just know things, right? It's not really intelligence in the sense that like it can come up with, it's not creative, right? It's not a human, it's still a machine. That's the best way I can break down what AI is. Does that help?
That helps a lot because I think conversations I've had with people, they are concerned that all these, in theory, robots, machines, whatever you want to call them, is going to be sweeping their personal data, and then that's going to be sold or used who knows where. So I think that's what a lot of people are worried about. Because, for example, if we look at Facebook, a lot of people put a lot of information on Facebook. So it's not difficult for those that are trying to source this information.
Exactly.
You're on holiday at the moment. We know where you're on holiday, who you're with. So it's not difficult for people who want to glean this information to work out. And obviously we're leaving a digital trail everywhere, as in we're using our phones. So we can work out what someone's routine is, how much they spend in their supermarket, when they go to the supermarket, that type of thing. So I think a lot of concern is this sweeping of data, personal data, because data fraud is huge at the moment, whether that's your identification, whether that's scams from your bank account, etc., etc.
Yeah, and I love that you're bringing this up immediately because these are all valid concerns. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, no, don't worry. No, you definitely should be worried about the information that you have online and the things that you've put on there, pictures, just like you said, like where you've been, where you are, if you're sharing your location, especially, like you said, with Facebook, because Meta recently has walked back from its voluntary policies of like fact checking and from fighting against hate speech. They've rolled back all their DEI. So they're basically, it's like a free for all. People can say or do anything with your image or your information, and Meta no longer is trying to protect you from like hate speech or like falsifying some information about you, because they just no longer care about fact checking. So all of those are very valid concerns, and I don't want to just worry your listeners without giving them any ideas of how they can basically fix any of these, like if they have been posting a lot, like every picture that they ever take or sharing all of this information, you can, if you're like, I absolutely don't want any of that, you can go in, download your data, download your pictures, all of that, and close your account. Or you can just, I know a lot of people like need Facebook because of the Facebook groups, it keeps you connected and things like that. But what you can do is you can clean out your profile and then keep it empty, right? But these companies definitely do make, like I know Meta specifically makes it difficult for you to be able to do things like that or even shut down your profile. So these are concerns to be worried about, but I think it's important for people to just know that like you said, what you put online leaves a trail. So my biggest concern would be to make sure you're not putting images of children. You know, children can't really give consent on sharing their images online. They're still children. So really giving them that option of anonymity throughout their life is really good. But also like careful with like if you're sharing your location, how easily it is. I don't know, I haven't used Facebook in years, so I don't know how that works, but I know like Snapchat, you can have your location turned on and then people can just see where you are. And I used to use Snapchat. I always had that turned off, that like part turned off. But I remember I could go into this map and see like where my friends were in the world. Like my other friends that use Snapchat, I could see like exactly where they were located. If you zoomed in enough, you could see like the street number. Like that's how exact it was. So you definitely want to be careful about how much information you're putting out on the internet. All that being said, I'm on the internet. I'm very much on the internet, right? I had a podcast. I have social media. None of it's private. I use it a lot for communication, for marketing of my own things. I also have a very like unique name. No one has the Andrea Ocarina, that like my first and middle name. So literally the moment you have my middle name, you can find me anywhere on the internet. So I'm telling the listeners all of this information so that they can make informed decisions about how much they share online and what they share online.
I think it's very interesting, Andrea, when you said you don't use Facebook or you haven't used it for years. There's a couple of decades between you and I, age difference. And my understanding now, people of my age are on Facebook because we're keeping in touch with our families and friends, we're sharing photographs. Younger people, in my experience, no, we're on TikTok or whatever. So I think there's very much a divide, as in the older crowd are using Facebook and the youngsters is like, yeah, my parents use that or my grandparents. So I think it's very interesting how you brought that up. And I think the thing is, older people like me, you know, we've had to learn all this technology. You see young kids now in their pushchairs and they're on YouTube and Instagram and all the rest of it, and they're still in their pushchairs. So they have grown up with technology literally from day one. So something I want to cover now is how can we use AI on a daily basis to help us? Because I think if we can understand something logical that's going to be useful on a daily basis, we might not be quite so scared about it. Okay.
I want to talk about the how to kind of relieve yourself from feeling so scared about these AI systems. Like I said, they're not actually intelligent, right? They're not coming up with their own ideas. These are all being trained by data sets. And so something that needs to be understood about these AI systems as well is that there's a lot of hype around them. There's so much hype. It's just basically like a lot of these systems get funded by VCs or venture capitalists because they're like, oh, with AI, we can do X, Y, Z. And then when the developers actually go in to try to do X, Y, Z, they can't actually get that accomplished. And there's been so many things that have been funded that when they actually come out to the market, they don't work the way that they were advertised to work. And so a lot of these AI companies are actually just like, either they're drowning in lawsuits, so they're like trying to keep their heads above water financially, or they just they don't actually work the way that they were promised to. So there's an example of I don't know if you saw the Amazon grocery store that basically it's just a box with things in it, and then there's no humans working in it, and then you can go in and pick up your things and you walk out, and then it just knows what you bought, and so it charges your credit card directly, that's connected to Amazon. Well, it turns out, because basically they advertised that AI was tracking you and then charging you at the end of your purchase. It turns out that there's actual humans behind that. There were data centers in India or in Kenya, people working and watching you shop, recording what you shop, scanning it, and then charging your card. It was not actually done by AI. And that's been found to have been done with numerous of these AI systems that are oh yeah, AI is doing this. But actually it's hundreds of developers in countries where they're not paid a lot, just going through and quickly processing this information that you're either giving them or that you're asking for. So I want to talk about how there's a lot of hype around AI, right? There's a lot of it can do this, it can do that. And then in reality, it's humans doing it and secretly doing it. And then they're found out later when they're audited. So that being said, AI also has a lot of what they call hallucinations. A healthcare company that was trying to use the AI to calculate how much psychology services that they give to people. And so they put in a prompt, and then it was 8 out of 10 times the generative AI would give a hallucination, which a hallucination means that it's not giving an accurate output. It will literally come up with information. I want to say all that to basically be AI is not all that it's made out to be. There is a lot of lies about what it's capable of doing. So I wanted to start that before I talked about how we use it in day-to-day life, so that your listeners know it can't do everything and it doesn't do things perfectly.
I think that's very valid, Andrea, because I think we've got the impression that whatever we want, AI can do it. Mm-hmm. Okay, someone was telling me yesterday, you can give AI what you've got in your fridge and it will come up with, okay, you can make this for dinner tonight. I just wanted to go back and say my first personal introduction to AI was probably about 18 months ago. A friend came to stay and we got talking about AI. And she said how she got introduced to it is somebody was having a birthday and they were saying, it's always a nightmare. What can you write in a birthday card? Mm-hmm. You want to make it individual for that person, and it can take a lot of brain power. And she said, all you've got to do is put, half a dozen things about your friend in there. Mm-hmm. They like wine, they play netball, they've got 2 grandkids, etc., etc. And it will create a poem. Mm-hmm. So I literally thought of one of my friends, put in half a dozen, literally, loves chocolate ice cream, wine gives her a headache, etc., etc. And it came up with this little poem. Mm-hmm. And I was just blown away by that. So that was just my personal experience of my introduction. And I thought that was quite fun. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a fun thing to have in your toolkit. But that was a long time ago, and it's being used here, there, and everywhere. Okay, so Carry on, Andrea.
Yeah.
Carry on with my education.
So I will say I tend to be very limited in my imagination of how to use AI. And I do end up hearing people like say, you can tell it what's in your fridge and it'll come up with a recipe for you. And I'm like, I've never thought of that. And I will say that things like that, it probably can help you with, right? That's not a very complex thing to ask it to do. Although I can imagine it being like, and then use millet. And then you're like, I never said I had millet. And then like, I wouldn't be surprised if it did something like that, where it just was like, and then you boil your millet. And you're like, I never said I had that. But obviously, thing with AI is that just because it hallucinates doesn't mean that it can't give you an accurate output. You just have to be aware that it hallucinates, read what it tells you, and then you have to basically just keep fixing it and fixing it and fixing it until it gives you an accurate output. And so I know people are concerned about it taking people's jobs, but what we have to remember is that it's a tool. And people are going to always use the tools that they have at their disposal. However, it's not a perfect tool. So yes, you can use it to create a recipe. I'm pretty sure I've done that before, and it's still, I make a tahini sauce that I still use to this day that ChatGPT gave me, I think 2 years ago. I know that people have used it for coming up with like a vacation itinerary if they're going somewhere. But again, you have to remember, like, these are things that like we have so many data sets for, right? We have so much data on like Paris and what there is to do in Paris and where things are located, and right, like people have been going to Paris for vacation for however many years, hundreds, I'm sure. And so there's a lot of that data already out there. However, once you start getting into more complex things like write an essay for me based on a XYZ, let's say a book, probably have access to that book, which is also goes back to that like training data and like knowing where that training data is coming from and whether it's got it illegally or not, right? There's a lot of creatives that are concerned about what they're creating going into these generative AIs and then being basically copyrighted. And or going against the copyrights. I don't really know how to express that.
I guess original work.
Yeah. And so personally, the way I use AI is like writing emails, especially if I have to write the emails in Spanish. I've been doing a lot of bureaucracy work right now with some of my other projects here in Spain, and it requires me to send a lot of emails. And in general, me and my brain don't work well with emails. And then I have to also do it in Spanish and then sound polite and like professional when doing it. So I will end up going into GPT and telling it, hey, I need this, this, and this. I need to say this, this, and this. And then it will give me a perfectly great email. I still always run it by my mom, for example. And I'm like, is this correct? And she has told me like, well, that's a weird word to say. Like, why don't you just change it to this? And then, so again, it still hallucinates even for something as simple as an email, but it's good enough, right? Like I could have sent it without fixing that and no one would have been like, oh, I'm not responding to this email, right? Like I would still have gotten a response and it would have been fine. But if you're using it professionally, you definitely want to make sure you're reading what it tells you. Don't ever use that first output that it gives you unless you've already learned how to prompt it perfectly, right? There's a lot of people that have spent many, many, many hours learning how to prompt the AI perfectly. And I personally don't have the brain space to learn the prompting to be perfect. So I just say something quick. I see what it gives me. And then from there, I'll start tweaking it. But then you end up spending, like sometimes it doesn't really save you that much time because you're spending so much time tweaking what it told you. So another way that I use it that it really helps my brain is breaking down tasks. So if I'm given a big project and I need to start it, basically I will give the GPT, hey, this is the project I'm working on. can you break it down into tasks for me? And it will give me tasks to do, like start from here and da 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 da. And sometimes it gets way too deep and the tasks are too intense, but it always gives me a great starting point. So for me, that's how I've been using GPTs, is by giving it prompts, so then it helps me with a starting point. But again, I try not to rely on it to give me perfection. And if I do need something that's a little longer than just like a starting point of something, I'm making sure I'm spending time reading and rereading everything that it gives me, because it gets really repetitive as well. That's something I want to make sure I mention. There's something that's called model collapse, and it basically just means that like we're saying that it gets trained from data sets, but what will happen is that it might give you back a bad response. And if you don't like check on that and say, hey, that's a bad response, and you use that response and then you kind of feed that response to prompt something else, then it's using this like information from a bad response to then give you a new response, and then it's going to give you a worse response. And so it's something called model collapse, where it's just like it's training from its own responses, and then it's no longer able to give you good outputs, because they just get worse and worse as the responses get worse and worse. Well, these companies are using good data sets, that they're good at reading through the data sets, and making sure that like false information isn't being used. So always read what it's giving you and make sure that it's actually telling the truth. I was a career coach for a while, and I would help people write their resumes, and we would use ChatGPT to help them like make their resume fit a job description. I always said, use this prompt, but like tell it to not make things up and like not make up information about you, because it literally would be like, and in my previous company I did XYZ and it had a benefit of 20% in the annual revenue of the company. I was like, where did you get that information? I was like, oh, sorry, yeah, you're right, you never told me that. It would literally just make up information to make you look good on your resume, which, because you want to have a good resume, but then it'll make up information. And then what happens when you get into an interview and they're like, oh, tell us about this process that you created that like increased the revenue of the company by 20%, and then you have no idea what you're talking about. So you really have to look at what it's saying to you, especially if you're using it in a professional setting.
I mean, Andrea and I had no idea where this conversation was going to go. However, I have already written down 2 notes. The fact that you use it for email was because you're translating from English into Spanish. Mm-hmm. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah.
If I'm translating, I will use Google Translate,
right,
and I'll do it from English to Spanish and then Spanish to English. That's fine. So that makes me quite excited to try something and see how it gets on. The other thing you mentioned is with projects, it creates a task list. I love a project, I love a task list, and I'm pretty good at breaking it down. But to put this through AI, to me, is just, wow, let's have a go. And I think it's one of these things, already you've given me the email suggestion and the project task list, that I want to run out of here and give that a go. So that is amazing that you've done that, because I have to say, I'm concerned about AI. I have used AI, and one thing I wanted to cover from my experience is I was using AI to create an image for an event I'm starting. So I put in the information and it came back, and with the age group it gave a lot older age group than I was looking for. Okay, that's not a problem. So I just put in, okay, maybe not quite so old. So it then came back with a good image, and it then gave me the right people with loads of alcohol. And I'm like, okay, that's not what I want. So, you know, a little alcohol, you know, the odd glass of wine, the odd beer, okay, but not the cocktails to the quantity we've got here. The next image came back, it had recreated the image with the right people, but for some reason the alcohol had been replaced by pine cone. And I'm thinking, okay, you know, that is way off scale.
Okay.
That did actually make me laugh.
Right.
So eventually it's like, okay, take out the pine cones, let's maybe replace it with tea and coffee. And it came back and it was good. But I thought actually that was quite a funny experience. And the other thing, when I was doing text, I did the text and I just put in, okay, copy and paste the text, just make this better. And it came back and it was actually very, very good. It put in these lovely images for the time and the place and all the rest of it, sort of little bullet points. But some of the language obviously was not language I would use. The question would be, the more I use it, will it get used to the language I would use?
Yeah, in theory, it's supposed to do that. That's what they tell you. Like, the more you use it, the more it learns your voice and things like that. From what I have found, I always have to prompt it correctly. From what I've heard how other people use it, like, I'm not super polite with my chat bot. I'll say like, please, or like, thanks, that was great, and then I'll continue with the prompt. But I'm very like to the point, and then it's to the point with me when it responds to me. It's like, okay, here you go, here's this. But then I've heard of friends that use it that are like, oh my God, that was such a great idea. Thank you so much. That helped me so much. And and they're like very excited with the chatbot. And so then the chatbot responds to them like, you're so welcome. This is such a good idea. You're going to do great. And like, I was like, I never get praised like that by my chatbot, but it's because I also am very like, to the point, this is what I need. Please give me this. Okay, thanks. And then that's it. And so I do think it does learn how you speak to a certain extent. For example, right now, there's this whole debate on LinkedIn about using an M dash, which is basically the like long dash in the middle of a sentence that kind of like carries the sentence over. It's like replaces, it's kind of like a comma, but it's different. I'm not a writer, so I can't give you the grammatical ways to use an M dash, but there's this whole debate. I just learned that it was called an M dash because of this debate on LinkedIn. People are like, how to tell if someone's writing their post with ChatGPT, there's an M dash. And then like you have writers being like, that's not fair. I've been like writing copy for like professionally for 20 years. I use M dashes all the time. And so I've told my model to never use M dashes because I've never used M dashes in my writing. I have a science background. I've never learned like such great grammar in my English writing, so I never thought to use an M dash. I didn't know they existed, and so I've told it to not use it. It still uses it, and it's within the same chat, because it'll tell you to, like, sometimes it'll train based off of the chat, like the same thread that you're using, but within the same thread it'll still ignore me and then use an M dash. So I think, again, like I said, like it has a lot of capabilities, but it's so limited, and it really a lot of times just does what it wants.
I mean, I guess that's the thing, is it's a bit like training the puppy. The more you use it for different things, it will get used to what you're using it for, whether you're writing articles, whether it's emails, shopping lists, recipes. It will get used to basically your life.
Right.
And I guess it will then build up a portfolio of the vocabulary, the type of things, are you very formal in your writing because you're churning out bits and pieces, or is it just what's in my fridge and giving me an idea for dinner tonight? So it is going to be that training process. And as you say, even when it gives you an end result, double check it. Is it in your style? Is it the language you...
Right. And like something that I came across when I was working as a career coach, people would leave language in their resumes, like words that they didn't even know what they were. I can't remember the example exactly right now, but I remember reading a sentence to somebody that like the ChatGPT had given back to them to give in their resume. And I was like, have you done that before though? And they're like, well, I don't know what that word means. And I was like, well, then you shouldn't keep this in your resume. They were like, okay, I did my resume, here it is. And then I read it and I was like, okay, can you tell me how you did this sentence that you're saying that you've done? And they're like, well, I actually don't know what like that specific, like the like verb in the sentence. They were like, I don't know what that verb is. And I was like, okay, well then that's an issue. Like you should not keep that in your resume if you don't even know what that word is. And then I told them what it was, and they're like, oh yeah, I have done that in other ways. And I was like, okay, great. But then like you have to change the language. You cannot keep what it just regurgitates to you if you don't even know what it's talking about. And so like that's what I'm saying. Like definitely use it. I use it, but always read what it's saying to you and make sure it sounds like you, because if not, like it's gonna, especially if you're using it in a professional setting, it's gonna be hard to like keep up with that appearance that you're giving in your writing, if you're using it for writing, if you don't even know what it's talking about.
I mean, that's absolutely terrifying, Andrea, because at least that person made that error in front of you,
right,
and not in front of a potential boss.
Exactly.
I mean, that would have been terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you would be out that door so damn fast,
yeah,
because basically you're lying. It might be more or less what you've done, but it's brought to the surface that you don't even know what that says. Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's the bigger concern, right? That people might not be able to critically think through what the outputs are giving, that these generative AIs are giving you. You know, like you and I went through traditional schooling and everything, and we were like traditional, I mean like without AI existing. And so we were taught critical thinking skills, right? We were taught to look for good resources when writing research papers, right? Like we were given these critical thinking skills, and education is being like defunded worldwide all the time and like continuously since I was in school. And so like there's less teachers for students, but also less resources, and then the teachers being inundated by all this technology the students have at their disposal, and then there's like curriculums don't catch up to the changing system, like the changing world. And so then are these kids being taught to critically think the way that they were in the past, when teachers don't really have time on their schedules to like think of brand new lesson plans, but also they're stuck on one curriculum that was given to them that was written like 20 years ago or whatever, like, or has barely changed in the last 20 years. My concern is like, how are the kids learning to write? How are the kids learning to critically think through this like image that is being like shown to them? Like, can they tell that it's an AI image? Like, I can tell what is an AI image based off of just like life and like seeing like illustrated, even like digital art that has been created over the last like 10, 15 years. But I can tell like that AI image has this like weird like perfection to it that you can tell that it's AI generated. But like, I'm not sure if children will be able to pick that up if generative images are what they grow up with, right? Will they be able to appreciate art anymore, right? Like these are the kind of concerns that I think about. Like, I don't worry so much about how I'm using generative AI. I'm worried about how like the world at large uses it, and we're not even talking, and we're talking about like individual use. We haven't even gotten to like how governments use AI. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of concerns that I can understand why people are concerned about AI. If we're talking about personal use, my advice is always read and reread and fact check what it's giving you, like not giving pine cones as drinks at your event. Also, just thinking about what these systems are doing to our creatives, right? Because a lot of the trading data sets, like for example, one of these like image generators was taken to court by Getty Images because it was so obviously using Getty as for its training data, so much to the point that like some of their images were getting this like little gray box at the bottom corner where the Getty like logo usually is. Yeah. And so like they were training them so intensely based off of Getty Images that like even their logo was being reproduced in these images. I personally never use it to generate images. I have in the past, like it was like a year and a half ago, I created something and I hated it because like you said, I had to like reprompt it, and then it would get crazy, and then there's like the hands are blurry, the text is weird. Like again, I haven't used it in a year and a half, so maybe the text writing is better, but it just like it just kind of gave me this, uncanny valley feeling. I personally hate that feeling, right? I don't want to see something that's like, it should be real, but it's not. And it looks like it has all the parts, but it makes me uncomfortable. And that's how like these generative images make me feel personally. And I know also like, not only does this like harm creatives and their like intellectual property, but also like, I wonder if you would have saved more time going to a page like Unsplash where you have access to like free photographs, and looked for like people middle-aged going to a bar and having drinks, and then like finding the correct image that you were looking for, and it's just a stock image instead of this AI pinecone generated image. Also, something we had to think about is the environmental impact that these data centers have on the world. Basically, there's something that it's hard to audit the exact numbers because these companies are like super like careful with their data. They're not careful with everyone else's data, but they're very careful with their own data. And there's something, it can be like 10 to 30 times more energy consuming to ask ChatGPT for something that you could just use a browser search for, like Google or DuckDuckGo or any of these other browser searches. It's like they've had decades to, also these like Google has had decades to become more efficient with their energy use, of course, but still like 10 to 30 times more, using more energy to just ask ChatGPT a question that could potentially hallucinate on and give you the wrong answer. And so I try to use it only for work and only for when I really need it, and when my brain is like, I really can't figure this out just by like doing Google searches or trying to think it out myself. And again, like, I'm not a writer. I'm not trained to be a writer. I don't work as a writer, so I don't feel guilty maybe fixing my resume using ChatGPT, because my brain is like a science brain. I worked in science, I worked in tech, and so I'm like, okay, somebody can write this sentence better than I can, and I'm going to let them do that. Again, always checking to make sure it actually sounds like me.
So just before we finish, Andrea, if somebody has listened to this podcast and they're going, okay, well, I want to have a little mess around with it and see where I go. Mm-hmm. What would you suggest they do? Just start with, I'm going to send a birthday card to somebody, give me some greetings that I can put in there. What would you suggest as quite a simple entry point to have a go with using AI?
Yeah, I think like if you have these tasks, like I write a lot of emails. So emails like what I go to, right? Like I don't want to have to spend 30 minutes thinking about like how to write this sentence correctly, because I will overthink it. So boom, put it through a ChatGPT and say, I need this, I need it to sound like this, and I'm talking to this person. It gives me that output. If you want to, I know we were talking about like writing a bereavement letter or a bereavement card for someone, and that can be really difficult.
That is the most difficult.
Right, because you want to make sure that you are showing up for the person that's going through a hard time, and also not just be like, hey, sorry you're going through a hard time, right? Like you don't want to do, and a lot of people don't know how to communicate like when someone's going through like a grief process, and so that it can help you with that. I know people, okay, for example, I had an AI podcast, which is how you found to talk to me, and one of my guests would use AI to talk through his feelings. He was like, like I can't always go to my friends for the things that I'm thinking about, or let's say he was in like a new relationship and he didn't want his friends to be like, oh, his girlfriend's not great, so he was like, hey ChatGPT, I'm going through this with my partner, like what do you think, like what's going on here? And it would like walk him through it and be like, well, maybe she's going through this, or have you talked to her about this, and and he was like, it was really great for me. And also like I don't think it's there to replace human therapists, right? But I do think it can help you organize your thoughts, even if it hallucinates, because if it hallucinates, you can get a laugh out of it and be like, no, that's not what I meant, right? Like, I didn't mean to serve people pine cones for their drinks.
I mean, I think it's a brilliant idea. I just have visions of people on the train on the way home, and they've had a rough day, their boss has been not the greatest boss, or they've had a really tough day. So instead of get home and let it all hang out on your family, stick it in ChatGPT,
Mm-hmm.
whether you speak into the microphone or whether you write it, and just, this happened, she said this, he didn't do that, and see
Right.
what it, just put something in.
Yeah.
Just, I want something to feel better about my day.
Right. And I actually, like, one of my first guests on the podcast, he has created a AI generative therapy, an app. So you can have it on your phone. It's called Plural. Yeah, it's really great. You basically do what you just said. Like, you're sitting on the train, you've had a terrible day, and you can pop in there and say, hey, I had a terrible day today. This is what I did. This is what I went through. And it will just it will like be like, oh, it sounds like it literally has a button that says like vent your feelings with no judgment. So like, I know a lot of times people will be like, well, am I kind of crazy for feeling this, and this? Well, this app will give you like an unbiased way to talk it out without someone else putting their own feelings to it, right?
I think that's brilliant, Andrea. I think that's where everybody should start.
Yeah.
It's just, okay, put in what's happened today and let your therapist. Oh my God, brilliant. Andrea, thank you so much for giving us an overview of what it is, where the information comes from. I feel better about it. I feel more excited to have a play about with emails and project task lists. Andrea, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We'll put a link to your podcast all about AI so people can have a bit of a deeper dive into it.
Sounds good.
Andrea, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was lovely.
Thank you for listening to our conversation, and I do hope you feel a little bit better about the future of AI. Go on, give it a go. Put in an email, use it as your therapist. So please subscribe for future episodes on whatever platform you are listening. It is free, and please share this podcast. So if you know anybody who's a bit worried about AI, doesn't really understand it, can't see how they would use it, send this podcast to them. And if you've got a story to tell, please contact me at allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story.